nature, there isn't a waste problem in nature, and that's because every animal's waste is another animal's food, or a material, or a source of something else. And if you think about waste like that, then maybe everyone should go back to having their own toilet at their own house, and it's a compost toilet, and everyone manages their own waste themselves. There are lots and lots of different ways of thinking about it, and I think we've been really spoiled by, as you said, sitting on the toilet, pressing a flush with drinking water, and it just disappearing from sight and never having to think about it again. And it feels like those times are kind of coming to an end with the population growth that we have. Okay, next question. So you mentioned political will as a barrier for change. Do you have any suggestions on how we can change the system? Just a small question. Where are the tensions between the different actors that need to align for progress?
Yeah, I think I've sort of answered some of that. I think it is an obvious starting point to think about municipalizing these systems. I think it's sort of bizarre that we privatize them in the first place. But one of the things is that there's lots of different actors and stakeholders, and if this work was to go forward, I think that would be part of what good consultation does. You would have because there's often, and I think it's a big challenge, I think, with architecture, design and planning, is that you have needs that butt up against each other. So housing becomes a kind of, the need for housing it's almost like in opposition. And I think that's when we're framing the problem incorrectly, because you frame it as an either and or. So either we deal with affordable housing and you have to deal with all this effluent running into UC, or we don't deal with affordable, and you create these sort of actual fake, I think they're quite fake arguments. And so it's, for one, it's alternative narratives, and I think that's what this work is trying to do, is to build alternative narratives to that race to the bottom that we have, of like, it's either this or that, which isn't true. I think those are two so I think that's kind of would be my answer that I haven't already, just to reiterate.
No, that's great, thank you. And I think, if we can get to a place where we can build the housing that people need and fulfill an improvement within sewage pollution, that's the dream, right? Then hopefully everyone's happy.
But I think I do think it's sort of mad that you can build, like, water doesn't get treated in the same way that hospitals do, and sort of thinking of services, it's sort of something that I think we've just really taken for granted and really not thought about. And it's now in this kind of moment of breakdown that actually we can kind of go, and it's across all of Western society. Infrastructure is largely being ignored because of its normalized and invisible qualities. Now, when you're swimming, it's only now when you're like, oh God, am I going to go for a swim today? Because has Southern Water released loads of effluent that we're actually forced to think about it?
That's true. Okay, 2 more quick questions. I did count. Yes, good. Going back to your 4 provocations, which, in terms of feasibility, do you think would be the easiest? Like, if you were given a blank page, like, where would you start?
So I think I have mixed answers in that. So the easiest would actually just be a mechanized system. The whole point and why those things are so successful is you literally drive up a truck, somehow get power supply, which isn't too difficult, plug it in, and then you plug and play. And that's why the Ethiopian state is actually using this as a viable sewage treatment for most of its affordable housing, whilst it figures out how to actually have large-scale infrastructure. But I think I wouldn't like that as an idea. I don't think it's would be the right thing to do. I also intuitively prefer and see the value in low-tech, natural systems, because I think these are basically free and cheap to build. So for me, that's a no-brainer. And so in that sense, I think this Whale Cliff project, I think it's the most challenging because I think it's such a loved area. It's such a beautiful area. It's such a unique area that I think you'd have a lot of different voices that would have a say. But I do believe there could be a quite light touch way that could be attended to, even if it doesn't solve the problem, if it lessens it. I think there would be a lot of merit in that. The problem with the roads project is that they're quite SUDS, sustainable urban drainage. The biggest challenge to them is that we also have a lot of our other infrastructures underneath our pavements, so local authorities don't particularly like them because it makes them maintaining their current systems quite difficult. So there is a challenge around that project, but it's not an insurmountable one, and I'm a big believer in just because a problem's difficult does not mean you shouldn't do it. So, and then the oysters, I think the oyster one for me is a very more provocative. I love the idea, and some of my favorite global projects are doing this, and it's happening around the world. I think it's the idea of infrastructure being alive, I just find so powerful. But I don't think it would be possible here because of the stakeholders involved, and I think I don't need to add to that.